However, sometimes things you leave behind tend to follow you, for better and for the worse. You can imagine my surprise that one of the very first projects that I was involved here in Svalbard was working with the three archaeologists from the very same University of Oulu I recently left behind. Oula Seitsonen, Vesa-Pekka Herva, and Aki Hakkonen, who have recently started a new project on the heritage of Arctic aviation. And so this evening, it is my pleasure to introduce one of them, Oula Seitsonen, to a talk here at the museum. Oula is an archaeologist and a geographer with a wide pedigree of experience, having worked in Finland, Norway, Canada, Alaska, Siberia, Mongolia, East Africa. Let me know if I missed any region or country. He has written a lot. His name appears on over 150 articles and book chapters. And since 2006, he has focused on the archaeology of the recent past, with a specific interest in the remains of German military installations in northern Finland. From that work, in 2020, he has written a book called Archaeologies of Hitler's Arctic War, Heritage in the Second World War, German Military Presence in Finnish Lapland. Given his extensive experience, Oula is an excellent person to have here at the museum to contextualize our own early aviation heritage that is found on Svalbard and across the circumpolar Gulf. So with that, Oula, it is my honor to welcome you here to the stage.
Thank you. Yeah. So, already introduced. I'm Oula, and I will tell about the conflict archaeological work that we've been doing for almost 20 years now in northern Finland, and about our new project studying the traces of Arctic aviation. And we just came back from today's field work at the European airfield now and the German weather station there. But a little bit of my own background, which is actually quite well covered already. And over the years, I have been involved in all sorts of heritage work, and my interests have always been geographically and thematically very widespread. I'm kind of curious about everything from Siberia and Mongolia to East Africa and America. And I originally started out rather traditionally studying Stone Age settlements and stone tools. But since then, I have worked with a lot of different things like geographical information systems, methods, and archaeological research history. And recently, moving towards the present day with contemporary and 20th century conflict archaeology and the public heritage value of various kinds of material traces. And archaeology is interesting science in that you can study basically anything from any time with the same methods. So the most recent materials I have been studying with archaeological methods have been the abandoned vehicles of refugees used to enter Finland in winter 2015-2016, and the distribution of comet masks. And there's some pictures from fieldwork in different places, Mongolian, Altai, and Siberia. And that's from my East African work, Sonjo tribesmen showing their bow and arrow skills in Tanzania, and recently also working with schizophrenia herding. And reason behind the vast geographical spread of my first are these two old Finnish archaeologists who are most known for their expeditions. On the left is an early 1900s archaeological pioneer in Finland, Sakari Pälsi. And on the right, our old professor, Aviation, with whom I got a chance to start working in East Africa, where he had been working since 1960s. Pälsi's, one of Pälsi's expeditions in 1909. Mine was true Mongolia. And 20 years later, I did the same trip with Thailand. It's another decent project that we carried out with Pekka and Aki, a couple of other colleagues in northern Finland, which also connects with Svalbard landscapes. We surveyed the only glacier in Finland, the Ritnitsohka, only to find that the glacier is gone. So there were only some patches of ice and puddles left where the glacier had been still 20 years ago. But we still managed to find a lot of old bones and wood pieces that dated, oldest of them dated over 2,000 years old. So the glacier had been there in some form or other for 2,000 years before melting away in less than 20 years. And we have just published a book related to that, a little more of that. In the background for the ongoing studies, my colleagues and I have been working for almost 20 years now with the Second World War material heritage in northern Finland, most importantly in Lapland Scout Heritage Project, where we studied the German military materials in the north and northern landscapes. And Germans were during the Second World War in Finland from 1940 to 44 as Finnish allies fighting against the Soviet Union. And from 1944 to 45 as Finnish enemies in the so-called Lapland War. All studies have concentrated in the materialities and landscapes. And besides studying past, we have studied how these material remains are still important for the local communities and continue to affect them, and how these communities have related and engaged with the wartime remains. There is an indigenous aspect to the heritage value of the wartime remains in Lapland. You can see the extent of that. And during the war, the German soldiers were almost 4 years in very close relations and friendly relations with the locals, as they were in the country as allies. And so several of the memories that the locals have of the German time also are very good. But the Germans never did very well militarily in the north, so of course, even the best trained and battle-hardened mountain jägers were really ill prepared for the northern landscapes and environmental conditions, and the fact that there was no road started. And even outwardly, the differences between the German soldiers and the Finnish allies would not have been much bigger. There you can see the groomed and sophisticated German officers eating from porcelain plates and drinking beer from glasses. And someone was brewing coffee out of snow. So and I did my PhD thesis in that project, and then recently published the book based on that, as Anatolis mentioned, and I can send the PDF of that to anybody who's interested, as the book is pretty expensive.
Right, all money.
And yes, so Finnish wartime relations with the Germans are still a bit difficult and bipolar issue nowadays. And still politically sensitive because on the one hand, there's a common memory of the good Germans who provided much needed help to the Finns and lived as the locals' friendly neighbors for several years and helped in the war against the Soviet Union, which was seen as the arch enemy of Finland. And already during the war, Finland tried very hard to display that it was fighting its own war, separate from the Germans, side by side, especially for the US. But for example, United Kingdom declared war on Finland, and they were pressured by Soviet Union to do that. Although that resulted only in one bombing mission in the Arctic Ocean area and some internments of Finnish ships. And then at the same time, there was the recognition that there are bad Nazis in Europe who were politically and outward allies already during the war and especially after it. And the war ended with the Germans burning down Lapland when they were retreating to Norway in 1945. Before the Germans, especially tried to distance itself from the German presence and sort of presented itself as a victim of Nazis owing to the burning of Lapland. Still in the 90s, when I was in the school, we went also this so-called floating dog theory, helplessly floating in the currents of war and ended accidentally assassinated the Nazis. And these complex allies come enemies and Lapland burners relationship, as well as the post-war embarrassment of siding with the Nazis, makes the Finno-German relations still a quite sensitive issue, kind of bipolar memory. And so, sidelining has also been marginalized the northern Finnish and Sami war experiences and heritage. The Germans were mostly north. Also, the so-called national story is very much in the south and in the fight against the Soviet Union in the Karelian front. It has also then left all the material remains and the immaterial heritage in the north, kind of forgotten on the national level. But on the other hand, it's very much remembered by the locals. And there are hundreds of decaying German military sites across Lapland, and some of these are remarkably well preserved. Through the decades, these have been on official level mostly ignored, which has left them open prey for the metal detectorists and military collectors. And any question of the heritage status has risen up only very recently, and they are still not protected officially, unlike here in Svalbard, where everything up to 1946 is protected. And in the public, these are typically presented as sportsmen that is exploiting the unconscious wilderness and natural beauty of Lapland. That's one of the best preserved German log houses in Lapland, but now the winters have been becoming more wet and the snow is heavier. The has finally caved in. And again, in local memories in Lapland, the wartime remains are still a kind of ever-present part of everyday lives for people and surrounding them in their everyday activities in the wilderness. And they remind the people of their own personal, family, and communal histories. And because of that, we decided to approach the work up there through community and public heritage archaeology work. As, for example, here is organizing public excavations together with the Sami Museum of Sweden. And that's the only time also when you can see Finns in colorful clothes. Locals often express that kind of a strong sense of ownership towards the wartime remains, and somehow also collected small fines, their homes, to protect them and prevent them from ending up in the hands of outside collectors who are typically from the south or from abroad. And they do this because they want to preserve the memory and materials that are related to their own Germans, who they remember as personalized individuals, instead of faceless mass of foreign soldiers, like informal stores. from the local point of view, the wartime remains act as witnesses of their own past and has become an integral part of the northern cultural landscape. And since last fall, we have built up on this previous work. In northern Fennoscandia, a new project called Arctic Aviation, which concentrates on the archaeology and heritage of aviation across the circumpolar north. Originally, we had also case studies planned inside the area where I have been in early 2000s. And also the sightseeing was requested at the moment. And in the project, we will be studying the material traces of military aviation, exploration aviation, and civil aviation throughout the 20th century. And Arctic has historically been seen by the outsiders as a dark no man's land and kind of open sea for resource extraction and military, knowing the local indigenous populations and their traditional life ways. And since the early 1900s, aviation has provided a tool for exploration, discovery, research, and warfare in the Arctic, as it has enabled access to areas that are otherwise difficult to reach by land or sea. And scientific and public understandings of the Arctic, but also can allow the spread of mass tourism. One of the early Finnish aero place that started the civil aviation traffic in Finland. In the project, we will be studying many kinds of case studies in different areas to highlight aspects of aviation heritage. For example, airplane crash sites and airfields. Pictures are from Mountain Siberia. And military camps related to aviation, Cold War radar stations, weather stations, anti-aircraft installations, and civil defense structures, such as this bomb shelter that is in the house where I live. And our main research questions include studying the general role of flying in the Arctic, what roles have the aviation sites and associated materialities played in the local landscapes through time, and how they have shaped the lives of local and indigenous people in these regions. And the actual traces of aviation in the Arctic, what material traces can we find still nowadays, infrastructure and activities, and what kind of marks they have left in the landscape and the local folklore, and what can these traces tell about attitudes towards these sites and their former users. And we will also be assessing how the ongoing climate change affects the preservation of these traces, and also conserve in what matter and what scale. And then also what the surviving traces and memories of aviation infrastructure and other materialities can tell us about these kinds of invisible threads connecting people and logistics across the Arctic, and about the collecting through local and transnational networks. What is the value of these connections, and what kind of value they continue to have nowadays indigenous people, and how these have affected people's interactions and connections with each other and with the wider world. We have started our research and carried so far only limited field research, and the work continues also today at the old airfield here. But we already have some preliminary results, especially from the Lapland side. And there you can see some airfield and crash site related stuff. That's one of the best preserved Junkers 52 wrecks in Finland, which is about 35 kilometers by road flights and 60 or something. It was much better than that until 1970s when the Finnish film company needed to film a crash scene for a war film, and so they decided to go there in the winter and explode the plane. During the work, we will be documenting sites and structures with different methods, such as 360 degrees imagery and 3D laser scanning. That's a laser scan I took yesterday of the Junkers event in 1943. And some work from today that just uploaded the airplane wreck in Adventalen, and also Aki is documenting it there.
3D.
Yeah, it's all. And we have also been using drone aerial photography and photogrammetry, which is another way of making 3D photographs. Here's that same Junker 52 that was in the earlier photograph. Over. And by putting these kinds of models online, even such inaccessible sites can be presented easier online. And in time, we will also include different kinds of open access map materials on our website. Information about former military airfields and crash sites, plane crash sites across the north. One of the most interesting aspects, at least to me, in aviation archaeology are the networks that show these invisible threads that tie remote places, things, and people together, and have introduced new materials to faraway locations. There's a map of some of the materials that we have excavated in Lapland and where they originate from. The remotest items in terms of their originate from Portugal, canned fish from northern Portugal, then some Italian beer and Serbian wine. Finnish Arabia factory ceramics, but also Bavarian ceramics and other Central European ceramics are found at the site. There's our colleague Mari Olofsson Lundemo examining Archaeology made barrel top and piles of military junk that has been left burned in the wilderness. And the amount of the material is often also one study these kinds of sites. There's a Volkswagen manufactured stove, which are the same kinds of stoves that they manufacture for concentration camps also. Last times and similar kinds of factory manufactured items. You can take all of them or take all of them to the museum, so you have to basically just count them and then decide to take small samples of these things at the excavations. But they often have manufacturers' markings, which then allow studying the networks connecting the different places and seeing how things work. For example, there's a Bavarian blade problem. And typically, we have also here noticed that whenever there are German plates, usually the central part from the plate bottom is missing, because that's what the people who come to the site, they take home, because I understand with the historical information, but in itself, it's kind of interesting observation. And here is one example of what kinds of things archaeological explorations can uncover that are not available from historical documents. These are some anecdotal and quite exciting finds that we made in one transcript in Lapland, phone record fragments. And in the lower picture, there's a so-called refitting process going on, which is the typical archaeological method used usually for prehistoric ceramics or stone tools. But it shows that there were shards at least from 4 different records. And then one old Sami lady who lived as a child during the war in the area, she had a photograph from there, where you can see the chromophone that was probably used to take these records, and also a pile of records next to the chromophone. And it's probably the same records that were then smashed into the trash pit when the Germans were leaving. And then during the refitting, I noted on one of the fragments the engraved master recording number. And excited about that, I decided to start asking from researchers who specialize in German verbal tune music if they could tell what recording that is. But basically every one of them a full catalog of German recording master numbers, so they can't help. But then I started thinking that there are a lot of people who have very specific kinds of knowledge, who are not academic researchers who would want a full catalog before they start studying something. So I posted the question with this picture, several social media forums devoted to gramophone record. And as a result, it turned out that these hobbyists had much more knowledge in this matter. And in half a day, after long discussions that they had with each other about details, about the different kinds of number types by different recording companies and all kind of different things, I got the answer and a link to listen to the song in YouTube, which really quite well shows the importance of cooperation with other people and researchers. Soldiers in this campaign and is listening to Rosita Serrano's recorded in Berlin, England. And inside goes a small moonlight journey and on the side German tango on Manuela. And Rosita Serrano was originally a Chilean singer who was very popular in Germany during the war, and also appeared in Finland, just from the country's biggest newspaper, cartoon. But then when she was continuing her tour to Sweden from Finland, she had to escape because Germans suspected that she's a spy. And also in the famous movie Das Boot, you can hear her listening to her recordings. And while searching for more information about Rosita Serrano, I came across this wonderful picture of a soldier in track impersonating Rosita Serrano from the Eastern Front in the Midsummer's Party in summer 1943, which is then a whole different story. Soldiers dressing in drag was quite common everywhere during the war, or all the wars. And that's another example of special kinds of archaeological finds that usually are missing from the documentary evidence. So the objects related to prisoners, which I used very poorly equipped and have very few items. In northern Finland, the Germans had up to 30,000 prisoners of war and forced laborers who originated from all parts of Europe. And you can see that also in some of the materials. Most of them were in Finland from Russia. I see, for example, on the writings of some of the items. Most of the prisoners' items are also self-made, like the also on the right, which has been made of car tire and wood. And napkins are made by the prisoners, like these cigarette box covers. Really interesting. Especially the one on the left, top left there is exciting because it can be so personalized to somebody named Jako. That's the export Jakova, but it means from Jako. So probably somebody named Jako made that and gave it to somebody. And then in the end of the war, it ended up burned in a trash pit. And there's another example of German prisoners of war engraving stuff. There's a kettle that's found in one of the prison camps with the Russian language writing on it. This time it's place names. Tosna, Krasnoye Selo, Anola, Essuja, and Narva, which are all place names in Estonia-Ingria region near St. Petersburg. I'm going to write the five. And then number 6 is where the kettle was found, north of the Arctic Circle. And these place names might, for example, tell about the origins of the places of origin of some of the prisoners or other important places for them that they were fighting, for example. And they wanted those places to be remembered by carving on the kettle that they were using. So what about Svalbard? Here we started preparing our research only a few years ago. So there's much less to tell so far than from Lapland. And for the past 2 weeks, we have now been working intensively here. And our study is doing a variety of science related to aviation, for example, the North Pole expedition flights, like Andreas 1890s fatal ballooning attempt and Bellman's early 1900s failed airship flights from Virgohamna. And Amundsen's and Bennett and Bird's flight attempts from Ny-Ålesund, and Nobile's successful expedition with the airship Norge from there to the North Pole, 2026, and then the disastrous airship Italia expedition and the rescue attempts related to that. The Finnish and Swedish pilots fly from Mortison Bay there to the rescue missions. And also the remains of related to the aerial mapping of Svalbard in the 1930s, Camp Smith. And on the Second World War remains is actually related to the so-called weather war, such as the Norwegian radio weather stations at Eastfield Radio and Arensburg, and then the German manned and automated weather stations. First of these, named Panzer, was the one that we were visiting today, established in Adventdalen in 1941-42, next to the old airfield that was also built by the Germans. And then the plane crash sites in Adventdalen, Adventjuden, and Nordheim. And now the aircraft defenses in Longyearbyen that have been also excavated by the museum in the 90s before the building of the Radisson Hotel. And more German weather stations. Nostalmusbaum. It's a bit up there in Signehamna on 1943. Station at Area. Airport Center. Smart help station 43 point I will open. Rugby station 44.5. And the last German side to surrender in the Second World War, Haudegen on Nordlandslandet, from where the crew was finally rescued in September 1945. I just seeing both. Also, some of the Cold War sites that are of interest include the plane crash sites on Hopen and Prince Karls Puhlandet. And Institute radio that I think also as a radio beacon for the transport flights and the Soviet heliports in Pyramiden and Barentsburg. So for the last 2 weeks, we have been exploring first selection of these sites, explored with Trivera by Steve Henningsen on MS Forum, something from your view and surroundings, airplane wrecks and weather station ruins here. And it must be remembered that all the cultural remains older than 1946 are protected by law as heritage on Svalbard. And if you come across any of these, they should not be touched. And, we were starting from Longyearbyen, Eastview area, Ålesund. We wanted to document the structures related to Nobile's airship expeditions, such as the hangar remains and the so-called Amundsen Tower, which was never used by Amundsen. And, our work was little distracted by 3 airs going around and limiting the scope of our research. From there, we continued to Signehamna, where the German weather stations Nosta and Nussbaum were situated. There the automated weather station remains in the top bottom, the camp in the lower one. Explored by the Norwegian troops who deployed the station, but there's lots of interesting finds lying around, like plenty of Prince-Marine oil barrels, house remains, and interesting stuff. And then we mapped there also the German summer camp higher up on the mountains with good visibility with all the fjord and the seaside. And there the finds are really amazing and really unique, with a lot of diagnostic finds that tell about the German living conditions up there and the materials that they brought up. And these are some of the best preserved Second World War materials that I have come across at any site. And, for example, several German glacier sunglasses, sled skis, and a lot of good stuff and hut remains lying around. If anybody happens to know this is Beneficencia Lima, that is stands on all the plates up there. Very happy to hear. So far we have only found out that there's apparently a charity organization like that. But how those plates ended up in a German camp on a mountain on Svalbard is a mystery, if they are related to that. Signehamna we went on to Vilkohamna, where both Andrea and Wellman had their bases, and documented those, and also there our work was slowed by the bears. And then we sailed down through Magdalena Fjord, Kapsmith, here, where we documented the seaplane base that was used for aerial mapping of Svalbard in 1930s. Finally made it was done at Svensk Huset. So just because it's connected to pins at the human shell. So it was an interesting place and obviously a haunted one. Still continuing work today up and down, and yesterday on the other side of the fjord. In time, we will be able to tell much more about the finds and we have time to process them totally. Get more than the first impressions of the find materials. So there might be another presentation at some point in the future. And there's our Svalbard Aviation team featuring Oula Seitsonen, Anatolis, Fennoscandia, and Archaeology and Svalbard. And there is the new book that we have promised to advertise about Finland's only glacier that is now gone. And it's available for free online. One reader described it as a metaphysical adventure story instead of a scientific text. So if you are something like that, you can download it from the link there. Kiitos.
Thank you. Is there a plan in the future to do excavations at the Signalhamn site, for example? Or is it ever going to be possible to remove the material for studying them?
Well, we have to think about that. We were just today thinking about the possibility of the plane wreck in Adventdalen because people have to tell the pieces of the jam as a 60-year-old river and it's poisonous. That's also very bad. But then excavations at the sites further out. There are surprising things that you can talk about from the pipe that you
Is there any map?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Is there any map where we could find all the crash sites? Have you worked on this on your?
We have been compiling different countries and all. We're planning to put it on our website once the website is live. Now there's just under construction.
Ulu.fi?
Sorry?
Ulu.fi?
If you Google then Erie Arctic Aviation, you will find the website. But there's nothing yet.
Oh, yeah.
I saw this map of the Nordic countries with different colors for the different sites. What does that signify?
Those were airfields used by different bodies originating from different countries. And then the other map was the crash sites.
The color signifies the status.
Yeah, in the crash site map, it was about those colors were about location.
something, a lot to work on.